Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining Tricycle's online practice session today. I'm Amanda, and I'm Tricycle's production assistant, and our guest today is Tara Brach, and I'll introduce her with a quick bio. So Tara Brach is a psychologist, author, and meditation teacher. She founded the Insight Meditation community of Washington, D.C., and is the author of several books, including her most recent title, Radical Compassion, Learning to Love Yourself in Your World with the Practice of Rain. And I want to give a few notes about our call today. So we are on a Zoom webinar, so participant audio and video are off. We're recording the session for anyone unable to attend live, and you can view all recordings as well as the schedule for upcoming sessions at tricycle.org/live. And our next session is next Tuesday, April 28th at the same time. And we are offering these sessions for free, and we appreciate any donations that you are able to give to help us continue these opportunities for everyone to connect with teachers like Tara during these challenging times right now. So if you're able to donate, you can do so at tricycle.org/donate. And finally, we will have some time for Q&A towards the end of the call. You can post your questions in the Q&A panel. You can see that below your video screen. And we'll try and get to as many questions as we can towards the end of the call, which should go on for about an hour. And if you're tuning in from Facebook Live, you can post a comment in the comments section and we'll add it to the list. And that's all for me. And thank you so much, Tara, for being with us today. And I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you all for being part of this. I'm delighted to be together. So we'll start in with a short meditation just to attune and arrive. And I invite you to, wherever you are, take some moments to sense how you're sitting or whatever posture you're in, to close your eyes. And let's breathe together in that simple way, a nice full deep in-breath and a slow out breath, so you can actually feel the sensations of the breath exiting the nostrils. And again, a nice long deep in-breath and a slow smooth out breath, letting go, letting go. And again, inhale deeply and exhale slowly. And then allowing the breath to resume in its natural rhythm. Simply noticing the quality of presence that's right here. Aware that you can be listening to sounds, receptive, open. And listening to and feeling inwardly the life of the body. Sensing if there's anywhere that wants to let go a little right now. So there's a relaxing back into presence, senses awake. A kind of intimate attentiveness, sensing your inner life, sensing the state of your heart right now. Feeling whatever intention drew you to participating in this gathering, what really matters to you. And you might widen your attention and sense others that are gathered, others that are with us, others that will be participating, just widening circles. Others who, like you in some way, are seeking to wake up our hearts. And as you imagine others, each in their own, probably sheltering or in their own place right now, you might mentally whisper, "We are friends." Just opening to that. We are friends. And sensing into a shared heart space. Okay, opening your eyes. Yeah, so my friends, welcome. I really am glad to be with you. And I began this way on purpose because I love these growing number of opportunities to be together and to feel our togetherness. And it takes a kind of an opening and an attending. Um, there's something that many of us are realizing more and more right now during this intensity of global crisis. And that is that it can wake us up. And we're also seeing how it can ensnare us in some old habits and reactivity and what we might call trance, where we're more dominated by our limbic brain, by survival. And we can see that. We can see that, and know others and friends have reported it, and the tension that can grow with people we're close in with, the panic buying that's happening, all the anxiety about money and health and dear ones. Um, we can see it for many in how we turn on ourselves, the kind of self-judgment and self-aversion that comes up, like, I'm not using my time well, I'm not writing that novel, or if we have a lot of time, our failure in parenting, because we're so many are on parenting, or for others, it's really about loneliness. I last night for my Wednesday night talk was on loneliness, so much depression, confusion. So we can see it, how it can bring up the shadow side, and then often get acted out with more alcohol, more drugs, um, feelings of agitation, anger at leadership that's not compassionate. So it brings out a huge shadow, and it brings out a shadow in our society. um, I know a lot of you are aware of how um, unevenly, how unequal the impact of this pandemic, that those who are economically down will get absolutely devastated. Um, those that are economically disadvantaged are also the ones most likely to contract the virus and to die of it. So it's a real horror. Really feeling that in this country, in the United States, how disproportionately African American lives are being taken. It's very, very deeply disturbing. And it just reflects generations of structural inequity. So that's a deep shadow. And we're also seeing the waking up. How many of you have found, and if we were together, I'd want to do a hand raise, the motivation to deepen your practice? Crisis can motivate us, the caring that comes up, that sense of our collective vulnerability and belonging, and how many millions are responding with just amazing generosity towards those who are most vulnerable. All the creative and authentic ways we are connecting with each other. So there's all this possibility. I've spoken to many people that feel this prayerfulness that maybe this disruption can be part of having a more loving world. And that is the prayer. I'm also fascinated how we can watch in our personal lives, and also the whole history of our species, how when there are major upheavals, times of collapse, those challenging times are when we often evolve, when we really evolve. And I've always been fascinated by one of the greatest periods of human evolution in terms of adaptation happened 10 to 20,000 years ago, when in that period our caring went beyond our kin groups and it extended beyond our relatives and then in widening circles. So that's when we actually became much more truly compassionate and pro-social. And if we watch, I mean, that's the trajectory, that when we get disrupted, when things fall apart, if we're paying attention, it can wake up more caring. I heard some while ago a story about Dorothy Day. Dorothy Day was a Catholic social activist. And when she was 8 years old, and this was the San Francisco earthquake of 1906, she watched as neighbors were helping neighbors, how everything about social class distinction and hierarchy, everything went away, and people were just showing up for each other, like she had never seen before. This is an 8-year-old. This is a seminal memory for her because she asked herself this question: why can't we be like this all the time? And that was the question that really was like a guiding light in her life. Like, how can we be that way all the time? How can the caring we feel sometimes when we're really in that shared vulnerability be something that's really available to us, rather than going on to mechanical and back into our old sense of others being others out there? So I want to keep kind of looking at that together a bit of, how do we live from caring? And what we know is that whether in crisis we get fearful and reactive, or whether we get calm and open-hearted, either way, it's contagious. We affect each other. It's contagious. And many are familiar now with this teaching. So many of us love this from Thich Nhat Hanh. He writes that when the crowded Vietnamese refugee boats met with storms or pirates, if everyone panicked, all would be lost. He says, but if even one person on the boat remained calm and centered, just open and present, he said, it was enough. It showed the way for everyone to survive. And this feels entirely relevant to us right now. How do we be that person? I mean, how do we let our practice open us to really our deepest knowing that we do belong to each other, and that what makes life meaningful is living from that sense of connection? And how do we open to be that person together, really? Because we need each other to awaken. And what I've seen in my own life is that adversity can awaken me when I'm really intentional, if I'm alert. And then, but often when something hits, initially when I'm not alert, I go into the old modes of fight, flight, freeze, judging myself, judging others, reacting. But it's when intentionality kicks in, like, oh, okay, this is a hard time. What really matters? That's when adversity can actually bring out the goodness. So this is a bit of what I want to focus on, how we can be intentional. The given is that we're going to react. Some of us will react more than others, but we're going to react because fear is spiking. And how can we be intentional so that we really can shift from that reacting to responding? And one of the key supports for me that probably is very, very familiar to many of you is one of the versions of the Bodhisattva Aspiration. And it goes like this: may whatever circumstances arise serve to awaken compassion. May whatever circumstances, so that can mean in our lives, positive, the biopsy's positive, our child runs into a really major difficulty, a relationship fails, whatever, our own sickness, someone else's, the deepest losses, may this serve to awaken my heart and mind. So that's the prayer of the Bodhisattva. And a Bodhisattva, if you're not familiar, is an awakening being, which is all of us, really. And I found that it's really powerful when things get disrupted, when there's crisis, when there's reactivity, to just to reflect on that. So I want to invite a pause right here and let you just take a moment to try it on. Just if you might want to close your eyes again and breathe and feel yourself here. Again, touching presence right here. And sensing whatever difficulties this crisis has been bringing up for you personally, whatever has felt most challenging. And to let yourself connect with honestly that this where it's hard. And then to sense from a real sincere place in you, may these circumstances awaken wisdom and compassion. Just mentally whisper that from your heart. And sense how that prayer might enlarge you. What is it you want to be called forth through this crisis? How do you want to be? May these circumstances serve the awakening of heart and mind. May they be of benefit to all beings. If you'd like to open your eyes again, please do. So we're going to look at a pathway of how, when we're caught in reactivity, we can wake up. Meditation practices, that's what they do, is they help us shift from that kind of reactive trance to responding from our most awake and open-hearted presence. So we'll look at that, and we'll practice together a little weave of mindfulness and compassion. Many of you are familiar with the rain meditation. If you're not, here's an introduction. And if you're familiar, that's good news, because there's no limit to how deeply mindfulness and compassion can go. For those that don't know, RAIN is an acronym. The R of RAIN is recognize, just to recognize what's going on inside us. The A of RAIN in this version is allow, let it be. The I is to investigate. And investigate isn't cognitive. That's probably the biggest mistake people make, which can just be a waylaying of attention. The investigate is, let's say, 90% somatic. It means you're really finding and connecting intimately with what's going on in your body. Because as they say, the issues are in our tissues. So we really need to be intimate with what's going on right in our body. So we investigate and we sense the part of us that's most vulnerable, and we sense what's needed. And then the N of RAIN, nurture, is offering what's needed. And either it's offered from our own open-hearted presence, or it's offered from, or we imagine it coming from some larger source. It doesn't matter where it comes from. Nurturing is the sense of care coming into the vulnerable place. And when we're done with those 4 steps, what I call after the rain is essential for transformation, because that's when we just rest and notice the presence that's here. Notice this shift from, let's say, being a a scared, frightened self to that kind presence that has emerged. Because that shift is really a shift into freedom. So before we practice together, I thought maybe I'd share with you personally what, how rain and how this particular mindfulness and compassion practice has been helping me with my reactions to the pandemic. And I'd say about a month ago, it was the beginning of March, I was meditating. I often meditate down by the Potomac River. I'm in Virginia. Um, and I was sort of sitting by the river when the full magnitude of what was going on in this global crisis really hit me. And it hit me very personally. They say that the portal to the universal is through the personal. Well, it was really personal. My daughter-in-law is pregnant. She was working at a major hospital in California. She has a 1.5-year-old. My son lives with, my son, and also with my ex-husband, who is a dear friend and moved in with them because he was in heart failure. So very high risk. She's working at a hospital and she could bring it to the family. And then my thoughts went on beyond my personal situation to so many people I know who are, vulnerable, people who financially will suffer greatly. It extended outward to those in prisons. It really hit me, the impact on prisons, those in refugee camps. I became really agitated, just a lot of fear for, our world and my personal world. So I began RAIN, and RAIN to the fear. And the recognizing was, okay, recognize this is fear. The allow, with allowing, it's a pause, or rather than judging it or trying to make it go away or ignoring it, it's just an allowing, an honest acknowledgement. This is here, let it be. For me, it helps to sometimes whisper, this belongs. Because it's like a wave in the ocean, it belongs. It's a part of what's going on. So that's allowed. And then with investigate, it was not hard because it was such a distinctive kind of twisting, clutching feeling in my heart. Generally, the throat, the heart, the belly, these are the places where emotion most shows itself. And I encourage people when they investigate to actually put their hand where they feel the feelings, because we are so conditioned to go away from the feelings or to not contact where it's raw, that it helps keep the attention there. And putting the hand there begins nurturing. And by the way, you can nurture at any time. It's always helpful to bring a kindness to what's going on. So it brings in the nurturing right as you're investigating. And I was feeling this incredible rawness, and I invited myself to go right to the epicenter. I've done this a lot, so I know that the more I can just stay right with where it's most intense, the more I'll find some freedom. So, and it sounds like bargaining mind. I'll be with you if you go away, but it's not that the fear goes away. It's just there's an expanding of being when I stay. So right to the epicenter, sensing what was needed, because that's a great question when you're investigating. What does this part, this vulnerable place most need right now? How does it want me to be with it? And I could sense what it needed was to feel absolutely held in love, belonging to a larger loving universe. So I imagine that. I imagine this, light-filled, warm, loving presence just bathing the vulnerability, and I had my hand here and I just kind of coach myself, let in love, feel it, open to it. So it really washed through, and there was a sense of kind of dissolving into that loving presence. And after the rain, it was so powerful because it was just resting in this compassionate presence, and no longer the fearful self. It was this heart space as wide as the world. I just had opened to being that. So I went from a fearful self to this heart space. And what was so interesting is the fear was still there, but it wasn't my fear. It was the world's fear. It was so clear that the fear is just, it's nature's protector. We are all rigged to feel it, and these are the times it would bring it up. So I just felt like, okay, resting in this heart space that's holding the world's fears. That shift in identity from a scared self to that heart space, that's where the freedom is. It's not that the fear goes away. And it also is what allows us to then respond to ourselves and others from a lot more resourcefulness when we're not identified as the fearful self. Um, then we can respond to ourselves with intelligence and care. So I share this because rain for me and for most people I know, it's never a one shot. Um, Many rounds, especially in times of crisis, we just keep on getting triggered. And yet, the more we have an easy to remember way, and we don't have to call it rain, we could just call it mindfulness and compassion, of really recognizing and allowing what's there, of contacting it fully, investigating, and bringing kindness, the more we reopen back into our natural awareness, back to loving awareness. And it can happen, I sometimes call it a light rain, that, once we practiced it, it can be very spontaneous and quick. One woman I introduced her to it because her son got the virus and she was really scared for the family. And she didn't know if it was rational fear because, he was symptomatic. He wasn't super symptomatic. He was just positive, and her family's pretty healthy, but she was very frightened. So she started just practicing this light rain over and over again. And it got to be simply, she would just go, okay, fear, let it be there, feel it. And then she'd just say, thank you for trying to protect me. I'm okay right now. That was the nurturing. And each time it was just something got larger. So again, we're going to practice rain together because it's a really valuable tool. You can share it with others if you feel inclined. When we're stuck, those are the times we most need to meditate. And those are the times we absolutely lose all sense of, okay, what now? So this is a simple way of remembering. Oh, and by the way, you can do it with a partner. It's a beautiful thing you can do online or by phones. On my website, you'll see RAIN resources, and one of the resources is a guided session for partners. So it's a way to kind of deepen our connection with each other and support each other. And if it's a meditation that really speaks to you, my book Radical Compassion is a guidebook in using it. So I invite you to check that out. But the bottom line is this: the practices that help us to come back home to ourselves, to be intimate with the life that's here and kind, let us be that person on the boat. They let us respond to our world with a really wise heart, a compassionate heart. So with this in mind, let's practice together. Let's see how it goes for you. Invite you to, if you aren't already feeling comfortable, adjust the way you're sitting or however your posture is so that you feel at ease. And sitting quietly, you might again close your eyes and take a few full breaths so you can collect your attention with the breath. As you did before, bring to mind something about current life that is bringing up fear, agitation, reactivity, and bring up something that's within your window of tolerance. And by that I mean not traumatizing, not that you feel will trigger real panic and intense fear. something about current life that brings up some level of anxiety, turns you against yourself, anger at others. Might have to do with how this current crisis is threatening your own health or safety or finances or the well-being of another or many others. And as you do that, you might, as you bring it to mind, the difficulty, you might again just offer that way of holding it. May this serve to awaken compassion. Just sense your intention even as you begin this practice. Now take some moments to deepen your attention to the situation so you can really enter the experience. It's hard to work with things unless we get in touch with them. So you might visualize a scene or a situation that has happened or you imagine might happen that brings up distress in some way. And see the visuals. If somebody else is there, see their face. And if there's words being spoken, hear the words. So you can sense, what's the worst part of this for you? What are you most afraid of or upset about? We begin rain by recognizing what's happening, whatever's most predominant. So you might sense what feeling is most predominant. Is it maybe fear or worry, anxiety, anger, agitation? Whatever you notice, you might just name it with a mental whisper. Well, just note it. And there may be several, and you might just sense what's most calling for your attention right now. And once you've named it, allow, let it be here. Sense a willingness to let be for now. You might use the words, this belongs, real kind, or just yes. It's like acknowledging this is the reality of the moment. This wave is here. It's part of the ocean. And then we begin to investigate with gentleness and with curiosity. And you might feel your throat, your chest, your belly. And as you sense, well, what's the worst part of this? And you sense the distress, what you're most upset about. See if you can find out where it lives, where you feel vulnerability in your body, your throat, maybe, or your chest, heart area, your belly. Notice what it feels like. And to help you, you might put your hand where you feel it and sense, is there heat, tightness, aching, squeezing, twisting? So in the background is the sense of what's really wrong, the story, what you're afraid of, the worst part, and then sensing in the body. What's it really feel like in my body? Maybe in the background you have a sense of what you're believing, what you might lose, how the pain's going to be. Sense in your body in a most immediate way where that vulnerability lives that goes with the belief, and see if you can feel right into the epicenter, breathing, attending, as if you're just sending the message, it's okay to be here. It's okay to be as much as you are. You're sending it to that vulnerable part of you. And then feel into it. As you're feeling into it, you might start wondering and asking, what does this vulnerable place most need right now? How does it want me to be with it? Does it want understanding, acceptance, company, forgiveness, love? Does it want to feel that belonging to something larger that can really hold it? Asking that can open you to nurture. Sense that you're maybe taking a few full breaths and that you can really inhabit the most awake, tender part of your heart. And sense how you can respond to that vulnerability, perhaps still feeling where your hand is. And if you haven't placed your hand on your heart or throat or belly, you might explore placing your hand and then varying the tenderness of the touch so that it actually expresses care. And sense what this vulnerable place needs. And maybe it needs right now a simple message like, thank you for trying to protect me. Or I'm here and I'm not leaving. Or you're held in love. Feel held in love. It's okay. It's an experiment to nurture. Just try out whatever will help this part to feel more of a sense of healing. And if you find it difficult to offer it from your own sense of your own heart, call on some larger source of loving, as I described I did, just sense a larger source in this universe. It might flow through someone you trust, like a friend or a grandparent. Bring that person to mind. Teacher, a healer, spiritual figure. You might see the eyes of that being just loving you, and just let that love pour out from them through your hand into your most vulnerable place. Maybe it's coming from formless presence, just bathing you. With the nurturing, explore the possibility of really opening and letting in love, letting the most vulnerable place in you right now be bathed in love. Right? Imagine that loving, that light, that presence coming between the cells, the spaces between the cells, and washing through your entire being. See if there can be a letting go into that loving presence. Like a river releasing into the ocean. Letting go. And for this final few moments and after the rain, just after a real rain, that's when things blossom. Sense in after the rain, this possibility of relaxing back and just being that loving awareness and sensing the presence that's really here, the heart space that's here. Noticing whatever shift there's been from when you started, the sense of a frightened self or an angry self or distressed self, to this more spacious being quality, that you can be the ocean including the waves on the surface, but you're that wakeful, tender openness. You're the heart space of the world, holding the world's fear or the world's hurt. And as a way of ending this particular meditation, I'd like to invite you to sense now that you're in a field practicing with many others, and that all of us are sensing vulnerability. All of us are in some way with the intention to open to the shared heart space. Together hold the world sphere. Okay, my friends, open your eyes and come on back here. And thank you for being willing to explore. I'd like to just take a few more moments to speak, and then we're going to open it to questions. I'd like just to name that when we have the courage to be with our own vulnerability, and I think that's what courage is, it's a willingness to be with vulnerability. When we do that with compassion, we're loving ourselves into healing, and it allows us to then be more attuned to others. We can accompany others in a way that's really allowing and accepting and courageously close with others, those that we're sheltering with, and widening circles of others. And I want to acknowledge again that pandemic time can be a setup for disconnection. As I mentioned, I talked last night about loneliness. It's already an epidemic, and this is exacerbating it. I've had many people speak to me about it. So it's essential to even be more intentional about widening our circles and connecting with each other. In other words, to honor the social distancing of our bodies, but not our hearts. And that's happening. But here's the challenge. When we do get really stressed, it's easy to go and to contract away. And when we do, the real suffering is we forget our belonging to each other. That is suffering. We forget what others are going through. We forget how much others are struggling. And one of my favorite quotes is, to be kind, everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle. We're all dealing with this enormous uncertainty. So to be the person on the boat, to live from a wake heart, we need to keep remembering, because it's very easy to forget what others are living with, that everybody's in that vulnerability in some way. So there's this powerful question when we're with each other on any level, which is, what's it like being you? What's it like for you? That we either actually ask, or our hearts are asking, so we just tune in. I love the way civil rights leader, spiritual elder Ruby Sales puts it. She says, Where does it hurt? So that's in some way her inquiry. Well, in Buddhism, this is really an intrinsic part of the Bodhisattva path, that there's an intentional compassion training, because the given is we go into our trance of separation. So we need to intentionally look to see the vulnerability and extend compassion. And it's only possible if we know how, first, before reacting, to kind of make that U-turn and be with our inner life. And by way of example, I'll give you a brief example of that. The inner and the outer was, that struck me so much. A man I was working with some years back, and a very driven guy. He had a very bad temper, kind of explosive, especially when he felt at work that those people on his company's teams were underperforming. But he also had it at home, very judgmental and critical of his family, a lot of conflict there. So he started coming to classes and started practicing rain. And I taught him how, when he was feeling angry, to in some way recognize and allow the energy. And if he could pause long enough and be with it, with kindness, then it would interrupt the pattern. He wouldn't lash out as much. And what he found is that worked, not all the time, but some of the time. Sometimes he just lashed out, but the percentages were moving in the right direction. So this is the part I want to share with you, that he told me at one point he was meeting with a project manager who admitted to him that the team was behind schedule on a major project and he was personally responsible and so on. He had let some things fall through the cracks. So this man felt this rising agitation, like, this was the kind of thing that he would have exploded usually. On some level, he was going, okay, angry, allow this to be here, feeling it. So he's kind of breathing with it. And he didn't blow up. Instead, he actually started listening and taking this guy in, long-term employee who was dedicated and an honest guy, a thoughtful guy. And he could feel he was weighed down. So not only did he not pounce, but he actually expressed his appreciation. He said, I'm sure you're trying the best you can. Well, this caught the manager really off guard. He hadn't planned to say this, but he said, well, my wife has stage 4 cancer and I have 2 teens, and just really a tough time. The 2 men hugged. This was the first time in his circumstances at work this had ever happened, and they had tears. And he told me, he said, Tara, a month earlier, I would have unwittingly just added to this man's burden, shut down any possibility for real contact. And I'm sharing this with you because when we're suffering, we do forget our belonging, and we're living in a trance, and we forget the realness of others and our own realness. So we need to be able to make what I call the U-turn and be with our own realness with kindness. But that lets us widen the circle with others. It lets us be available to care. I had the experience this morning after I meditated. I was listening to a podcast. Not always a good sequence, but I was. And on it, they were covering a story about the prisons and how many people are dying of the virus in the prisons. And it's horrific. And quoted one inmate as saying, we're dying and we matter. Please help us. And I just broke down crying, because the helplessness of their helplessness, my feeling of helplessness, being at a time when we don't have a responsive, compassionate leadership, it was just, it broke me down. And yet I felt like, oh, I am so glad to be real and to feel connected to the realness of what's happening. And that feels like very much a part of our training, that we open to our own vulnerability. We remember, where does it hurt for the people in our close circles? And we extend our attention right now to those who can't stay at home because they can't feed their family if they do, or those in the front lines that we hear about every day not being given the equipment. So there they are trying to save lives and risking their own. we extend our attention to families who might have a member who's an immigrant who can't now be with their family because immigrants are to some degree going to be shut out. All those at great risk, especially African Americans in this country because of a long oppressive racial hierarchy are just absolutely suffering disproportionately. We open our attention in that way. Our practices are so precious. They really help us get real. And by getting real, they help us be the one on the boat. So I want to just leave, those are enough words for now. I want to open it to questions. We have some time, maybe 10, 15 minutes for questions if anyone has any. So I'll wait to hear from you, Amanda.
Yeah, hi Tara. That was wonderful. Thank you. So we will be doing some questions now. Okay, so for the first question, I have one from an anonymous user who asked, my best friend is in a rage with COVID-19. She is consumed in a fire of blame, blaming those who perpetrated this virus, rage at those who are capitalizing on it. She sees me as naive and maybe stupid because I don't share her concern and rage. I fear I may lose her because I won't go to that dark place she's in. When I talk of mindfulness and love, she scoffs. What can I do?
Amanda, there was something in the sound that went right in the very first part. I heard the rest of it, but can you repeat the first part again?
Sure. So, my best friend is in a rage with COVID-19. She's consumed in a fire of blame, blaming those who perpetrated this virus, and rage at those who are capitalizing on it.
Okay. And then the inquiry is, I don't feel this, my practice isn't getting me caught in blame, but I might lose the relationship if I don't. Yeah. Yeah. So when somebody's blaming, they're hurting. And if there's a way that you can in some way acknowledge the depth of the pain that's there, not making her wrong, not saying, it doesn't help to argue. We can't convince people, but what we can do is care that they're suffering and to in some way acknowledge, if we really look deeply, and this isn't what you'd say to her, if we look at our own ways of blaming, underneath the blame, there's hurt and there's fear. I mean, I have found myself many, many, many rounds, probably daily, blaming leadership that I consider to be absolutely heartless. And then sensing under that blame, I'll sense in myself, under the anger and the blame, I'll sense fear that so many people are getting hurt and more and will die. And then I'll sense under the fear that I care. And so if you can in some way acknowledge acknowledge how painful this all is without saying you're wrong or right, and also say, and when you listen, you can also sense deep down that she's angry because she's caring about so much about the hurting people in this world. Acknowledging that core level of caring can help to keep your connection. So I hope it's helpful, because many, many people are blaming and we all get caught in blaming, and we need a way to both accept that happens and it's coming from pain, and also know how to drop under it. So thank you.
Yeah, okay. So another question. Here is one from Lisa. I'm fortunate that I've not been as severely affected by the pandemic in the way so many have, but I've had the experience of not handling a situation very well when a family member suffered from a severe episode of her mental illness. I experienced some extreme negative emotions, fear, anger, resistance, that completely hooked me and held me captive for several hours. It didn't help the situation and probably made it worse, especially for my family member to whom I profusely apologized. I did come back to a centered place, but wished I could have been able to recognize and stop the hijacking before it got very far. Any suggestions on how to be able to tap into my centering resources earlier in the process?
Thank you, Lisa. I pretty much everybody I know has a number of things that have happened in these last months where they regret how they reacted. We all are getting hijacked. And you may be familiar with this metaphor, but it helps me so much when I think about it of somebody going for a walk and seeing a dog out in the woods and going to pet the dog, and the dog kind of lurches with its fangs bared and angry. And you go from being friendly to being really angry at the dog, and then seeing how the dog has its paw in a trap. And then they go from being angry to, oh, you poor thing, maybe not going close to it because it can be dangerous, but their heart's forgiving. And if you reacted with fear or judgment or whatever at that expression of mental illness, your leg was in a trap to some degree. In those moments, some part of you was really hurting. You were scared, you were off balance, you weren't connected. And the first step to having more access to your resources is to truly forgive that you got hijacked. I mean, really forgive. In fact, let that be part of your commitment to awakening. And if you ask, how might that circumstance serve awakening? It'll serve if you forgive and allow that this body mind too gets hijacked, to really be tender towards that. And that very atmosphere of self-understanding and self-kindness actually wakes up the frontal cortex, where we can be more compassionate and more mindful towards others. The other thing I'll mention, Lisa, is something that's really helping me right now, which is I've this, like many people during this crisis, I've extended my practice. And um, what I do now is sit in the morning and at night before I go to bed, and I end my morning with this sense of my deep intention to have an open-hearted presence with with whoever I'm with. I even think through the day of what I'm going to be doing or who I'm going to be in touch with, just because if I mark it in my mind, I'm more inclined to remember. And then at the end of the day, I'll sit some, not as long because I'm sleepier, but I'll review the day. And if I notice where, it was open-hearted and present and authentic, it's yay. And if I wasn't, it's not, I don't turn on myself. It's more like I just look at it and sense where I was kind of in a trance. And it actually deepens my resolve, because I feel so much more at home if I am connected to my heart. So this bookending of the day is something I feel has made a huge difference for me, because it kind of holds my life in practice. So forgiving is number one, and the second is some form of holding your day so that you have more of a gravitational field towards being at home in your heart.
Okay, so another question. So we have a question from Simona. How to deal with envy and anger when we notice or think that other people's lives, even friends, are much easier than our own.
Oh, it's such a good one. And Simona or Sonoma?
Simona.
Simona, thank you. It's so good because, wow, comparing mind, we do it in every which direction. And in a way, there's in the Buddhist text, they say that the very last thing to go of all the hindrances is that comparing mind. And we do it in all directions. I mean, I've written about how I got caught in special personhood, thinking I was in some way more important. And I've written extensively on how I compare to others and go into a trance of unworthiness. We tend to swing in both directions. When you see it happening in some simple way, just note it as, okay, this is comparing mind, and it's universal. It really is. That in some way, I'm the victim, I have it worst, I'm the oppressed one, or I deserve more, or, I'm better than others, whatever it is. And then sense under comparing mind, go right into your body, and this is rain, recognize it, let it be there, feel where it is in your body, and you'll sense underneath it just the raw pain of it, because when we're comparing, it's the pain of separation. We feel bad about ourselves, we feel separate. So just with some courage, just feel into that and breathe and sense the reminder, the wise reminder that vulnerable part of you most needs, because it's a part of you that feels in some way like you're not having your needs taken care of, you're not getting what you need, you're not good enough. It has one of those core feelings of not okay. So what does that part need? What would be the message or the reminder that would help that part feel valued, feel cared about, feel belonging? I'm trying to get in that habit of just offering that in. Many rounds of that, it's like whatever you practice gets stronger. If you practice comparing mind, being jealous, and then just believing the thoughts, it'll strengthen those pathways. But if you practice comparing mind comes up, getting jealous and going, okay, pause, let's do a light rain with this. Hold that place. You interrupt that patterning, and you actually have the opportunity of inhabiting a larger sense of your own being. You really can sense a shift in identity from the jealous self to that kind of heart space that is holding those painful feelings. So I really invite you to let this be a place of practice, because it's a juicy one. It's a real portal to freedom. And thank you for your question.
Oh, okay. So I think we have time for one more question. So we have a question from Maria. How can you help someone to develop compassion and to help them see how important it is? Someone who has no interest in being compassionate.
That's a good question, Maria. There's a lot of questions like that have to do with how do we help others change, and we can't unless they want to change in some way. What we can do is model and be compassionate. We can't teach people about Buddhism, but we can be a Buddha. So it's almost like feeling into where does it hurt in them that would block that interest or desire in compassion. Because when someone is cut off from wanting to be compassionate, or from that whole direction, that's a really painful place. Our trajectory really is in waking up towards wholeness to feel our belonging and care about each other. So you might just, in your own inquiry, where does it hurt? What's stopping this person from feeling that kind of connection that would then make them tender towards others? And then bring your heart to where it hurts in them, and let go of some idea of how they should be, because that'll get in the way of you responding to them how they are in a way that can be healing. So I hope that's helpful. Thank you for your question. And Amanda, I heard you say this is the last, so we will, and thank you, Amanda, for moderating this. This has been great. And we will do a short closing together.
Yes, thank you, Tara. Thank you, everyone who asked a question. So I'll give a brief outro before handing it back over to Tara to close. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today. We have another online practice session next Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern with Sylvia Borstein. So keep checking tricycle.org/live for upcoming session dates and to view past recordings. And again, we are providing these sessions for free. So if you want to help support this and our other efforts, please consider donating at tricycle.org/donate. And may everyone be healthy and safe. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda, and thanks to Tricycle. I mean, this is such a beautiful offering. Even if you're stretched, even just offering a little bit of dana really can add up. So I really want to encourage the donating. And also, Sylvia Borstein is wonderful. So I hope you get to be with her. Okay, my friend. So let's practice. Let's do our final kind of attuning together. And again, close your eyes and take a moment to let your awareness sweep through your body and sense if there's any ways that you're holding on to tightness or tension unnecessarily. You might let go through the shoulders a little, softening. Let the hands be soft. Relax your belly. Let this next breath be received in a softening belly. This breath. And now this one. And again. Feel yourself inhabiting your body. Feeling yourself aware of your heart, intimate with whatever state your heart is in right in these moments. And in the same way that we started, as we close, sense your intention as we depart today. What's your heart's intention? What is it that you really would like to have called forth in you through these more difficult times? And deepening attention inside, you might sense and scan if there's any part of you that wants attention, that wants acceptance. Anything, any part of you that's feeling vulnerable. So we again take some moments of bringing a kind attention inwardly, just recognizing what's there and really allowing it to be there. Finding it in our bodies, breathing with it. And if you like to put your hand on your heart and just offer whatever message of kindness you sense will help you to come into more wholeness, more wakefulness. And sensing the heart space that's here. Just the quality of presence and tenderness. And from that place, bringing to mind a dear one who can use your healing attention. And bring them close in your mind's eye to sense what they look like, how their eyes look at you, what they might be going through. With the inquiry, what is it like being you right now? And just as you might tenderly touch your own heart, you might sense you can bring that same tenderness to them, offering your care, some message of kindness. May you be free from suffering. And perhaps you imagine with that, holding them or touching their cheek. I sometimes imagine giving a kiss on the brow. It's such a tender expression. Then bring to mind someone you know who's a person of difference in some way, different class or different race or religion, person who may be very vulnerable at these times. And again, let that person be close in and let that inquiry be there. What's it like being you? Might be someone you know, but it might be someone you don't know. Could be someone who has different political views than you, different sexual orientation or gender identity, different physical ability. Someone who's vulnerable that you can sense it. What's it like being you? In the same way, sensing their vulnerability and offering your care, some message, some expression of kindness. And now sense this heart space. It's holding your own being, holding a dear one, someone who's different. And sense that this heart space is holding the world sphere. You can expand and sense many others. You might listen to the words of L.R. Nost. He says, "Do not be dismayed by the brokenness of the world. All things break, and all things can be mended, not with time, as they say, but with intention. So go, love intentionally, extravagantly, unconditionally. The broken world waits in darkness for the light that is you." So we close with the sense of this shared heart space, and you might again imagine the field and all of us in our sincerity, wanting to bring forth a more loving world. And feeling that shared prayer, may all beings realize our essence as loving awareness. May we live from loving awareness. May our actions bring forth a more loving, peaceful, and just world. May all beings awaken and be free. So namaste and blessings, my friends. Stay well. Take good care of your own life and of those lives you touch. It's really been a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.